Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. And at the time of this recording, Jerry actually has just returned from a big trip. He'll talk more about that, but he just went to Mongolia, to a group of people there. And when we were discussing what should we talk about for this particular episode, I said, why don't you tell us about your trip? And maybe we can kind of integrate that into, how does that work kind of in the Mindfully Gay, umbrella, and what lessons can we learn from his trip that we can integrate into ours. And so we will be talking about that, but to broaden that a little bit, talking about what's called a pilgrimage. And there's different ways of describing what a pilgrimage is and what cultures kind of do this. We were talking about, like in Australia, there's the walkabout, or in other cultures, what are some other ones?
Vision questing.
A vision quest. And these seem like kind of these big tasks that someone takes on, and it takes, a chunk out of their time and lives where they're in pursuit of some wonderful, life-changing experience. And that probably is the case. And so we wanted to talk about that, but also, what could be your pilgrimage, your personal pilgrimage? And maybe you're on one right now and don't even know that you're on one right now. So I thought we'd kind of highlight
I like that.
the different ways that we can define what a pilgrimage is.
Give ourselves credit for the fact that we are going through these pilgrimages pretty frequently.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think it can be, since we talked about this the other day, I'm thinking, as a therapist, I'm always mindful about what is my time to decompress, and here lately, just like a half hour on a cardio machine, listening to music and just disassociating from all the cares can often be a very contemplative moment.
Mm-hmm.
A sweat lodge.
Right.
Aren't there yoga retreats where you go for silent retreats?
Absolutely. A yoga retreat. Actually, I'm going to be hosting a yoga retreat in July, and just getting away and having some focus or intention of something. Even just our retreat that we did in April. We've got one coming up in September.
Wait, I'm sorry, I have to say this. You just gave me a really good idea. So when I'm doing private sessions with people, maybe I can offer them as a way to bring it to a different place. We can have an all silent training hour. There'll be no speaking. I'll just be pointing to what's on the paper. you this now. Anyway, sorry. Keep going. Sorry. Yes, that's going to be next level training.
There you go. Next
you
level
heard it here
first with Nick.
Invented here on the Mindfully Gay
podcast.
Just now it was invented.
Right. So, what is a pilgrimage? Just from your experience, Jerry, maybe from this recent trip, what would you consider a pilgrimage?
Well, here's what I think is the component. So I've been hosting trips to Peru and Mongolia.
Yeah.
So where we go in Peru, they speak Quechua and Spanish and other languages. It's a very different culture. It's outside of my standard norm.
Right.
When I go to Mongolia, right, they speak Mongolian. I am definitely the minority when I'm there in terms of nothing is anything that I relate to immediately. I have to adjust to it. And when I think about pilgrimages, I've done the Sundance ceremony, which is a 4-day concentrated ceremony where you are without food and water, that you really are barely clothed even. But you're just out there with your thoughts and with your prayers. Vision questing is the same way. The walkabout is a similar concept. And so to me, the component of a pilgrimage is stepping away from the addictive patterns in our life, right? And to decompress from the things that I rely on to occupy time and space, that is often a diversion from where I need to be internally.
Yeah.
we'll talk more about the trip here in a minute, but we had long bouts on horses, like 8 to 10 hours on horses with no earbuds. It was torture.
No podcast.
There was no podcast, no music, no Mariah Carey. I mean, this was deprivation.
Right.
I would have turned around and gone home.
But what was interesting, and everyone on this journey talked about the kinds of things that were coming to mind.
Yeah.
And I know for me, there were places where I was sitting with questions of regret, as well as adventurous ways of thinking about reinventing myself in certain ways.
Wow.
And I remember at some point on one of these horses thinking, wow, I just never give time to this. And I think that's what a pilgrimage like this allows, is getting outside of the addictive patterns give us permission to think more creatively and visionary about our lives. Yeah.
I really like that. And when we were talking about the retreat that we just hosted in April, we're doing one in September, because we went back and forth in regards to where should we do it, because I have this idea, and I think you're speaking to this a little bit, of going away.
Yeah.
Like you said, stepping out of our norm. Like, so we were thinking of stepping out of the city and going down to this lodge or this, ranch, retreat center, right? So you're away from all what you know and to do this kind of work. And I think that is conducive to doing good work, because then you don't feel compelled or distracted by, oh, I got to go home, or I got to go do this, or I get to my phone or whatever. But going away, really, you are away. And you can't, if you don't have quick access to those habits, you really have to just kind of sit in this space and do your work. But we did end up doing it in town.
Exactly.
But I think we were able to still create a contained space, to do this kind of work.
And if I can, I'm sorry, it relies more. So you're absolutely correct. The act of getting away from it all is provides this barrier that kind of allows for that container to happen.
Yeah.
But what we had to do here, and I think it's a really important skill, and I think it's part of kind of what we're going to be talking about pilgrimage and how it can be an everyday type of thing, is that what we had to do when bringing it into this house is we had to rely more on self-restraint, and we had to be there for each other in that restraint to hold that container so that those outside, so that Mariah Carey couldn't come in and tell us who we needed to be, whatever, so that the outside influences couldn't come in and distract us from, exactly as you said, getting outside of your comfort zone. And that is a lot of what we did in that retreat. We were going emotionally into places and sharing things that I know Cole, who I was with, was not, on paper, that's not something he would have signed up for. But because of how we contained everything and what we created and held for everyone, it made, stepping outside that comfort zone not only comfortable, but life-changing.
Right.
And I think that's why I'm grateful that we did host it here in the place where we live, around the surroundings and the things that we see day to day, because it does help to teach that, okay, I need to get on a treadmill with something, and I need to escape all this crazy stuff for this period of time. I need to do this for my mental wellness. And I feel like that's kind of what came about from doing that in the house.
Yeah. And you mentioned we really relied not only on just kind of that self-control, really, but we relied on each other.
Yes.
So we formed community.
Yes.
To look after each other and take care of each other, and to help hold each other in that space.
Together in the process.
Yeah. So it made it feel like, oh, we're all in this together.
Yeah, and it also, you're less likely to fuck up, right? You're less likely to cheat. You're less likely to go check CNN or whatever the hell, because we're all in this together, and there's power in that.
Yeah.
So pilgrimage. So we're part of what we're saying now is, stepping out of these habits that we kind of get stuck in. And I know I have mine, and it does make sense, and it does help me when I'm able to go away. Like when I've gone to Peru or have gone to a retreat or something, it just creates this space so I can do the work and create the intention that I, want to do. But why a Peru? Why a Mongolia? Why something that magnificent? Why would someone do that?
Why not?
Well, I asked the question because it just seems. I'm just
It's
thinking about
intimidating.
our. Yeah, exactly. I'm just thinking about our listeners. Like,
It's a tall order.
I can't go to Mongolia.
Right.
When am I going to go to Mongolia?
Right. Yeah.
How am I going to do this? Like, oh, you're talking about doing all this great mindful work, and I have to go to Mongolia to do that.
Right.
Well, look, there's a couple of logistical pieces for whatever reason, my life took me to those places, and I was able to build relationships. Mongolia, in particular, has some of the oldest and richest traditions around shamanism. The word shaman comes from this part of the world. It comes from Siberia. It comes from Tuva. It comes from Mongolia. So when we talk about shamans here in Salt Lake City, Utah, we have light workers and we have all these interesting concepts about what a shaman is. But in Mongolia, a shaman is someone who is in direct correspondence and relationship with ancestors. And the rituals and ceremonies that they bring out are an echo of that. I happen to get an opportunity out of the blue to go to Mongolia. I didn't even know much about the country until I got this invitation.
Right.
And almost immediately I started meeting these shamans who seemed to very intuitively understand what I was doing. Even though they had never seen a sweat lodge or that. First time I met a shaman, he was looking at my hand and he says, "I see you at a fire ritual."
Wow.
And so after the ceremony, I pulled out my camera and showed him pictures.
Yeah.
And he was very intrigued. And so part of that was just the relationship building. And knowing that there's this history with shamanism. And then where we go in Mongolia, where we've gone many times, is to the northern part of Mongolia near the Russian border to what's called the Taiga. And the Taiga is where the Reindeer people live. And this is probably one of the most oldest nomadic groups of people that still exist. And they have domesticated reindeer. They live in teepees, no electricity, no running water other than the rivers and streams that, other than dinosaurs, have not been witnessed.
Wow.
And so we journey out there. It takes 4 days to get out there between jeeps and horses to actually get to where they're at. And so, there's all these. And what I've noticed about the trip, obviously I want to go and have this National Geographic moment. But getting there, what I recognized was the power of being in this untouched natural ecosystem, being in relationship with these people that at first thought you would think, oh my gosh, what a hard life. And yet by the time you're leaving, you're wishing you had that kind of life.
Wow.
But it's a complete disassociation from all the triggers that we hold on to in our existence, which liberates, for me personally, but I would say with the guests that I've taken out there, everyone will say that it liberates and gives permission to think of your life in such grander terms. And, I think Bruce and I had an experience where we started inventorying our house, thinking, boy, if we had to pack everything on 2 horses, what would we get rid of?
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And what it would be like to live without our iPhones and computers and iPads and social media. And the same thing about Peru. We go to the Amazon and the Upper Andes, and again, we see people who are living off of the grid that we've become so attached to. And in those natural environments, there's this invitation to think deeper and more creatively about your existence and what works and doesn't work.
And I would venture to say without the stress and anxiety that comes from modern living, from the things that are so working against your understanding of self, right? You've shown me pictures. I'm just so endeared by the children and the reindeer. It's just such a beautiful thing to me. And I always contrast it. Like we've got, John and I have nieces, and they're 3 and 5, and they're just always glued to the pads. Like, and it's just like so much. There's nothing else. They never are looking up at the physical world. Even they're just so engaged with the pads. They're quiet, so the parents or whoever's watching them is happy because the kid isn't talking up. But like, there's no life. There's no playing with reindeer. Like, it's just. It's just that the pendulum has swung so far for us in this direction, and I think that's why this conversation is coming up, because we have to, in an interest of having better sense of self and mental health, we have to start limiting that. We have to start managing the way that the outside world influences how we see ourselves. And we have to take breaks from that place so that we can go inward more. And we're finding that through these retreat groups that we host, we're able to do that together. And it's a profound break from it all.
You know, my relationship with water forever changed after a Sundance. In a Sundance, you go 4 days. Like Sundance this year will be in August. So it's hot. It's 100 and plus degrees. Wow. But you go without food and water for 4 days. Wow. And then when they bring the water in and you take it for the first time, it is transformative. Literally, your body, when I drink, my body suddenly profusely starts to sweat because it has that capacity. And you just realize the power and medicine of water. And I would use that as a metaphor for these type of pilgrimages, that when you go out in the world, things that you take for granted can be profound. And then think about the implications of, think about all the things that trap us. I was listening to the last couple of our podcasts, and we frequently talk about the trappings of how we limit how we see ourselves as gay individuals. But to go out in this kind of an environment and to just discover the simplistic beauty of who you are, and to walk away with a sense of appreciation about that.
Right.
Sometimes it takes disassociating. I need you to love me. I need you to see me. I need my mom and dad to tell me I'm okay.
I need the likes. I need the comments.
Like in Mongolia, Bruce and I are there as a couple, and we introduce ourselves as a couple, and it's interesting to just see it not register as an issue. And it doesn't keep them from inviting us to participate or to help out even.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. What's coming up for me, I'm just thinking about our episode about gay gifts and blessings, and the steps even to even get to that. I was like, well, what are my gifts? What are my blessings? And it sounds like, or it seems like this dissociation, this stepping out of our habits, being stripped of what we are so comfortable with, and the removal of things that we take for granted, like water and food. And when those layers get peeled away, all that's left is just core, just essence, is just soul. And I think that's when it's scary. I will say it's scary, but that's where we have the greatest evolution of ourselves and revealing of our true beings. I
spend time with it. No, it's exactly what Lodge does to me. It's exactly the place I get to where I'm like, my God, I gotta take my skin off. I'm running around the lodge like that. You definitely
Nick, sit down.
It's so intense, but that's me trying to run from. I've got to just go inward. I have to be with what's there. I'm stripped of everything, and it's there that I need to be, and it is uncomfortable, and it is scary, and I want water, and but it is. That's exactly what Lodge facilitates for me. It's a very intense version of that, but it is definitely that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when people will ask for water in lodge, because my first inclination is, you think you need
You
it.
think you need it, yeah.
Because you're addicted to the idea that comfort facilitates something.
Mm-hmm.
Definite relief. Comfort, it's going to facilitate. That's exact. I mean, I'm a water whore in the lodge sometimes. Every time I'm going around drinking. And Bruce even once is like, you need to slow down. You're going to get sick. But it was good. It's wisdom. I need the wisdom. I need that guidance in those moments. But for sure, that is, it does. You think, oh, I'm going to drink this. I'm going to be just fine. And that's not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to share. I don't share this story a whole lot, but my very first experience in working with ayahuasca was a very interesting experience because I experienced my own death, and as it was happening, I was very conscious of the idea. It's like, I'm dying, and I'd never done. I've barely drink alcohol, and so this experience with ayahuasca was very outside of everything I was familiar with. And I remember as I was sinking into this place of death, kind of seeing this laundry list of places that I had put my fears. Do I have enough money for the mortgage? Do I have to pay the bill? What about this? What about this scheduling issue? What about this thing at work? But it was almost like this, like the credits of a movie. It was just kind of cascading. And I felt like my spirit was laughing because in that moment I thought, look at how I've wasted my time and my energy on these senseless things to worry about. And it's all going to end.
Yeah.
Right? It was a very profound experience. I even asked Bruce, I said, was I laughing? And he goes, no. Because I was laughing at myself and how foolish I had been with all these anxieties. But you know what it did is it forever shifted, because once I died, it was incredibly blissful and liberating, and it kind of resolved anxieties about death, which was interesting. It was so resolved that I almost days after the ceremony, I felt I was too casual about my life.
Wow.
And I had to kind of sit down with myself and say, okay, I'm deliberately choosing to be alive, but I'm going to do it differently. And I'm letting go of these fears about, will everything be okay? And I have not been consumed in those particular parts of my life. And that happened 20 plus years ago.
Wow.
Now that's pretty dramatic. That's with ayahuasca, blah, blah, blah. But I can tell you on this trip in Mongolia, right? Again, I went to some really interesting, deep places in my mind about, look how I'm spending my time or the things that I'm focusing on. And is that really how I want to spend the last quarter of my life?
Precious life,
right?
Yeah. And it gave me an opportunity to consider what my options are at this point in my life in ways that I had not otherwise considered.
Yeah. It just allows you to look at yourself with a new lens, a new perspective, your life journey, your life path, being able to kind of stop and take note. Where have I been? And where am I going?
Yeah, and what really matters.
And what really matters.
Yes.
And just be able to take that time to sit with that.
Yeah. So if Aunt Gertrude doesn't get me and that I want to be gay, or that I am gay, or how I do my life, right? Sometimes that becomes all consuming. And if I give myself a reprieve, I might actually give others permission.
Right.
Without any expectation of what their outcomes should be.
So it's amazing what this work can do. And you mentioned going to Mongolia, Peru, your experience with ayahuasca. You talked a little bit about sweat lodge, but these still seem like kind of big things. Even I do yoga retreats and teach yoga classes, but the yoga retreats, it's a similar thing. You might be going somewhere, or it's out of town or something, and you're going to this lodge or retreat space, and we're diving into yoga. And one of the things that I'm intending, as far as kind of setting a foundation for the weekend or week or whatever it is for those students, is that we're going to take time to be still and be quiet. Because I find and believe that we are so distracted by the phones and the noise and the chaos, politics, religion, all this stuff, social media, we're just bombarded, right? And so it's just this constant distraction. And so we have no time, and there's no quiet in order for us to sit down and do our work. And so going on a retreat, a yoga retreat in this case, allows for, we're putting the phones aside.
Yep.
We're turning the volume down on everything. And so that you can just sit, literally just sit, be still, and allow whatever's going to show up. And usually, you're just kind of flooded with thoughts. Mm. And one of the practices that I like to do, because that is going to be something that happens, you're just going to be flooded with your own thoughts, and it's more distractions, and it's like that list, those list of credits, like, oh my gosh, this is what I think about all the time? Oh my God.
Why?
Right. So once you're able to take that inventory and look at all that, then you can start to shuffle and decide, like, well, that's not important. Well, that's not important. And like, why am I thinking of that? And I think it starts the process for some folks to release and let go of those things. And like I said, it starts peeling away the layers so that you get to see who you really are and what you really want for yourself. And like you said, when you came back from that ayahuasca experience, you were doing life quite differently. Yeah. and having that experience with death, you were doing life now very differently.
Deliberately.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's not just happenstance. It's not just accidentally happening. You're doing it on purpose. Yeah. It's deliberate. Yeah. And I love that, because you're in control. It's intentionally, yes. And you're in control.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important piece of that.
And, I have to speak to the dangers of not doing this, because I'm reminded now of this lady client that I'm just starting with nutrition. And she's close to my age. Food is attacking her. Ooh. Food, and these are issues that have just started about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, she learned that her husband would die. And 5 years ago, she learned that her husband had terminal cancer. He was a cigarette smoker. And so 5 years ago, she began the process of the lists, of the worry, of the utterly moving away from a person, a human, and just being this vessel. She has kids. She has a husband. She's worried about them. It was just worry. And what that can look like, I'm not saying it is like this every time, but what it is for her, what that can look like, the way in which that type of continual stimulus, that stress stimulus, that she didn't have a chance to take a break from, what that can look like for an individual physically as it articulates. For her, thyroid. It goes right to thyroid, and it messes with your thyroid's function. The thyroid, trust me, I've tried to dive into understanding thyroid hormones. It's very complicated. But I can say that, the thyroid is responsible for producing a number of hormones that help to regulate systems in the body, most specifically metabolism. And so for this individual, her thyroid gets thrown out of whack. And unfortunately, with the modern medical system that we have, and I know this because I've had several clients, and including my mother, the protocol for testing thyroid is the scope with which they look at thyroid health, or specifically all of those thyroid hormones, is very limited because the insurance companies make it so. And so what often ends up happening, and it's happening to her, and it's exactly what they did to my mother, they end up giving a prescription, a medication that keeps them in a thyroid place that's either hypo or hyperthyroid, or Hashimoto's is what it's sometimes referred to.
Yes.
And so I know this from experience. When I finally fought to get my mother's thyroid fully tested, and we therefore understood the T4, T3 combination of medication that she needed, her hair started growing back, her sensitivity to cold went away, and she started sleeping. And so, but my point being is, this is an example, definitely, of when life gets out of whack, out of balance, and there is no time to stop and breathe and think about yourself and what you need, and you are utterly consumed with worry about the others around you. It can start to affect the organs in the body. And the organs in the body are part of this grand system. And when it gets thrown out of whack, things like foods that we've normally had no problem with eating can start working against you. Oh. And it's a really hard thing to live with when carrots start making you sick. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just a good example of what can happen when modern life, with all of its stresses and worries, start taking over. Our systems start getting thrown out of whack, and we decline. That's exactly what started happening with her.
Okay, So now I have to get on my platform. So there's a couple of really good books. One's right in front of us called The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. And that's one of the things that he starts to deconstruct is, again, our addiction to modern medicine, which, look, I take Tylenol, I see the doctor, medication is helping me in my life. So this is not anti-doctor. But we've become so addicted to this medicalized approach to everything, to trauma, to self-esteem, to depression, to anxiety, that we've stopped exploring these root causes. And I've even told you this, right, that I think a lot of trainers and nutritionists could go a long way if they were in relationship with therapists, with their clients.
Most
because
definitely.
A lot of what's happening with clients, right, is psychosomatic. But what Gabor talks about in his book, right, is how do we, instead of getting crazy about diagnosing and medicalizing, what happens when our culture has gotten away from looking at root causes of things. There's another book by Joe Tafur called The Fellowship of the River, in which he talks about his journey to the Amazon and working with Amazonian shamans through ayahuasca, and how he's a medical doctor and how he was witnessing shamans working with people with chronic medical conditions through shamanism from South America. And I've seen this in Mongolia, where the shamans really are kind of like the psychotherapists of the nomadic life in Mongolia.
Sure.
And that through these shamanic techniques, they're admonishing people to make changes in their lifestyle and how they relate to the land, how they relate to their ancestors, and then how they relate to their emotional well-being. Yes. And I see this as a therapist all the time, and it's interesting in our culture that we don't really want to sit and talk about it. We don't really want to process it or have an experience. And I'm even thinking when Charles was here and we did our session with him, how many times did he pause and invite us to go into the feeling of the grief, the feeling of the loss, the traumas?
And not only that, when, what was his name? He came before.
Ruben.
When Ruben was here, do you remember what Ruben said to me when I walked into the house? He asked me about the day.
Yeah.
And he asked me how was the day? And I thought he wanted to see if I felt what I felt about the day. And that's exactly it. And yeah, we in this modern life, we think too much. We're not feeling enough. We don't have opportunity to feel because we're just inundated with the things that all the time we have to keep thinking about.
So I think about your client, right? And
yes.
I know what the nutritional approach would be, and even and one of my disillusions with psychotherapy as a therapist, right, is the profession's become very template driven. We're looking for the right equation to get you the quickest results. But I have to wonder, what would the shaman's approach be to this woman who seems to be carrying around a lot of grief, anxieties?
For sure. Yeah. Right.
What happens frequently, and I saw this happen with you and Charles, when there was this invitation to feel it,
Explore it.
to pause and to lean into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was such a wonderful moment too, and it was a wonderful reminder to do that, to exercise that, and that's just something that he just does, and really helps whoever he's with to do that. He's able to kind of take a snapshot and say, stop right there, feel that, just pause, pause and experience that feeling right now.
I want to share with you an experience we had in Mongolia that was a highlight, but it was also challenging, maybe a little frightening. And we had left the Reindeer People, did a day of horses, did a drive to this other nomadic family with this well-known shaman. And when I say nomadic, like if I'm like standing here in Sandy and could see into Ogden, like there's just nothing. But there'd be this one yurt.
Wow.
I mean, it's that kind of vastness, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, this shaman kind of lived out in the middle of nowhere. And I had met him last year and had this nice little connection. And last year he invited us to come back this year and he would do ritual with us.
That's nice.
Well, he wanted to visit with Bruce and I. And so we were visiting, and he was telling us that his daughter, about a year and a half ago, his daughter several years ago had committed suicide. She had thrown herself into a river for whatever reason and left behind a daughter. This daughter was raised by the shaman and his wife and their elderly people. And this granddaughter that they raised had a child that died at 18 months. That the child got sick. They tried to get it medical assistance. The medical clinic was closed for whatever reason, and the baby passed away. And so this mother, who is probably 19, 20 years old, racked with grief. And the shaman was saying, she just can't get out of bed. She can't function. She's just broken, and my rituals are not reaching her. And one of the other people on our trip introduced himself as a psychotherapist with a specialty in grief. And now psychotherapist doesn't necessarily translate very well into the Mongolian language. And so our interpreter had said that he was a healer of the mind. And so the shaman said, I want this healer of the mind to come talk to my granddaughter because I can't reach her. And then I want you and Bruce to do your ritual. Well, I love my little friend. He's actually kind of a mentor in these ways. And I had a talk with him about, being culturally mindful. But he tried to have this conversation with her as a traditional therapist. And the girl just even kind of stopped engaging with him because it just wasn't connecting and was more engaged with the interpreter who kind of had this motherly presence. And we kind of, it was an impossible thing they were asking him to do, but he tried. But then what happened is Bruce and I did a pipe ceremony with them. And if you've done pipe ceremony with Bruce and I, there are times where our spiritual gifts become a little bit more amplified. And so Bruce was able to do some kind of energetic healing work with her and the family. And I started getting messages. And so I just started speaking to that. And there was a transformative moment where all three of them, they do this thing when they're just really highly been blessed by something. They'll do this, hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. They'll do it 3 times. And it's first time I'd ever seen it. And I was like, I looked at my interpreter and she's like, brother, it's a good thing. This is very good. And, but what it impressed upon me was what resonated with their spirits and what they needed was a connectedness in this spiritual kind of container, that there was no sense of condolence or resignation that could come from our minds. Yeah. I'm sorry for you, or how does that make you feel? Right? Which is what we do as therapists, right? That's the template. What they needed was dedicated attention to be witnessed in their pain, and to have it reciprocated in this spiritual process that elevated their spirit. And it was interesting because Bruce and I work in tandem. I mean, I think if there was any question about our relationship status, it gets resolved in those moments. And that didn't cause any hesitation. They were just grateful to be received and witnessed in that way. And the young lady, through the interpreter, talked about how that brought understanding to her heart, understanding to her spirit, like, it wasn't like, oh, my mind's resolved. It's like these things are now in synchronicity. And when I contemplate what happened there, I just thought, one of my ponderings was, how do we create more opportunities to bring this body, mind, spirit connection together? Like the retreat in Mindfully Gay, right, is, yeah, we want to get together and build community, but I just don't want to be able to say, I recognize your face. I want to know what's in your heart.
No, we saw people's pain then. That's what we all did. We shared.
And we witnessed their beauty.
Yeah. Yes.
That came up in the podcast. That the witnessing of these gifts that had never been witnessed before.
And
to
articulated.
And appreciated. And shown appreciation for to the individual with the gift who never knew that they had a gift in the first place.
We were in a room full of shamans.
Absolutely. And that's the power of community. And what I'm sensing from that experience, Jerry, that you just shared is, this connection to, how do I say this? Allowing for her pain to rise to the surface, so to speak, and for you to recognize that and to greet it and to almost celebrate it in a way, but just to meet it as it is. And that's the thing, that's the point, meaning it wasn't judged, it wasn't suppressed, it wasn't pushed away, it was just allowed. Be the way that you need to be right here, right now. I see you. I see you. And I think, and I hope we did that at the retreat too.
For sure.
That people, here we are in our group, people were vulnerable, people were talking about their personal things, and we just were able to just sit and be witness to it, and be witnessed, not judged,
Analyzed.
and analyzed, but then celebrated. That's a gift. That's a gift. Do you see that? We got to amplify and magnify and lift up something they just thought was never knew that they had. Right?
Exactly.
And I think, I don't know, kind of going back to this, the reason why you might go on a pilgrimage. This is what can happen.
Yeah,
that's what can happen.
I think. We're doing a hike tomorrow, Mindfully Gay, in the 112 degree weather, because we're going to learn something about ourselves. But I had a couple of years ago, I was getting ready to go on a big hike, and a friend called me who was going through an awful breakup and was just distressed, and I'm literally walking out the door, and it's like, I need to talk, and I'm like, I need to hike. And so I said, look, I'm going to go hiking. Why don't you go with me? And we got up the hill we got into the hike a bit. And we were talking on the drive over to the trailhead and a little bit on the trail. And then at some point, because when I go hiking, I like to sit. I like to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I like to take in nature. And I said, look, I want you to sit here
Mm-hmm.
and just be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Let nature take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I went up to the top of a waterfall and did what I did, and probably came back a half hour, 45 minutes later. And the energy of this guy was so dramatically shifted. And we walked back to the car in silence, and I said, what happened? And he goes, I don't know. I just kind of unraveled.
Yeah.
Like it, just everything that felt so pressing
Mm-hmm.
no longer felt pressing. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, the lessons of nature is like the trees don't compete with each other.
No.
It's like, I really like that trunk of yours.
Right. But
I wish I looked like that.
They're not posting selfies on Insta for likes, like
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's a different, and you're right. It's a nurturing environment.
Well, and like I know we'll go hiking tomorrow. We'll start out social and what have you. But I know at some point, probably when it's the most difficult part of the hike, is we're all going to go into our spaces of can do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when we get to our destination, we will be in that place of, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Satisfied with yourself that you showed up and did that.
I've had that experience. Yoga is not like a thing I do a lot of. But I know like when I was in a class of yours not too long ago, and I remember thinking to myself halfway through the process, like, here we were in this room, it was quiet, we were going through these movements, and I was just like, I just remember having this realization, like, look at what my body is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he brings this up all the time. It's that, oh wow, I just did that, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they can say that, when they do that. And it's appreciating yourself and your abilities. It feels good. It's a feedback loop. It chemically gives you the feel goods, and it's not something you can do with the overstimulation of the modern world, the things that happen. It prevents you from getting there and doing that. I think what we're always inundated with are ideas of what we should be and what we could be and what we better be, and we need to have this set up for retirement. It's nonstop. And then when you take pause
Mm-hmm.
and you put yourself through something that you maybe don't want to really do or is going to be a challenge, and you get through it and you get to the harder points, in which it's in yoga or the hike, and you start turning inward, and then there's that you reward yourself with being proud of yourself for what you did. And it's something that I thinking about the client that I just brought up, that woman, for 5 years she didn't do that. For 5 years she never had that moment. It was just stress and worry and the way in which that articulates physically into our systems and the way it can break them. And, she needs to go on a hike. She needs some yoga. She needs some time of peace with herself and showing up for herself and doing something difficult and feeling the rewards of doing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You talked about the hikes, because we host these hikes. I teach yoga, some of which are free. And so it's sounding like to me that, kind of thinking about our listening audience, like, well, I can't do a pilgrimage to Peru, for whatever reason. But maybe something a little bit more simple and accessible, like a hike, or go to a yoga class or a meditation class, or even as simple as sitting outside.
Yeah.
Because what I'm threading together in all of this morning is that connection to nature, or what's natural,
physical and natural.
Yeah, just
right.
natural,
right.
just our natural being, but then our relationship and connection to nature. Because I think what happens in nature, just as you took your friend on that hike, and I want to give a shout out to a friend of ours who is now doing what's called forest bathing, which is a kind of a meditative walk through nature, where you take a moment you walk, you really take in what's around you, and then you take a moment to sit and be quiet and be in relationship with the water, the birds, or whatever is around you. And the relationship is that we are all connected. And if we just sit in that stillness and silence, those trees, that grass, that water is going to speak to you.
Yes.
It will speak to you. It may not be as obvious as you, it's like, it just talks to me. Well, it can.
You have to learn to listen.
You have to learn to listen, but it is that being still and being quiet.
Yeah.
But even if you don't even believe that or don't think that works, or you're new to that, just do it. Almost fake it till you make it kind of a thing. Just sit. Just sit in nature. Just sit down. Take off the headphones, turn off the social media, and just sit. Mm-hmm. Because the powers that be are working. Even when you don't think they are, like, well, nothing happened. I didn't feel anything. Because I get that a lot. I didn't feel anything. I said, don't underestimate. Because a lot of unconscious, subconscious things are happening. Plus just that spiritual, ancestral, natural realm. Frequency. Yes. It's at work.
Yes.
And it is doing something.
One of my first interactions with Melodoma Samay, I got a cowrie shell reading from him, and it was in reference. I was dealing with a pretty intense professional situation that I was in, and it was very disruptive. It was definitely outside of my control. I was feeling pretty victimized by the situation, and he did this reading, and part of his readings is he would give you this prescription to do, and the prescription would be different rituals and what have you. And one thing I needed to do at the end of a series of offerings that I needed to do is I needed to go to a mountaintop that gave me an unobstructed view. Mm. And those of you who are familiar with the Utah area here in Sandy, there's Bells Falls. But when you get to a certain peak, you can see the entire Salt Lake Valley. You can almost see as far as Tooele.
Wow.
And I had to go do this at sunrise. So I'm hiking my miserable little ass up this hill, and I'm just like, it's dark, it's cold, and so I'm hiking up there, and I find this perch, and I've finished all my rituals, and I'm just starting to take in this view. And the idea was to realize that my opportunities in this world were as vast as what I could take in. And I was suddenly just overwhelmed at how massive this valley was. I could see the Great Salt Lake. I could see as far as Tooele. And it just inspired my spirit to just get out of the immediate problem and to get the big picture.
Yes.
And, it was a very powerful moment. Just like that deer outside the window.
Wait, but I have to say also then, I love that, to get out of that, the rolling wheel of what's always going on, and to stop for a moment and get into a more simplistic place of contemplation. I have nutrition clients that it depends on the individual, but sometimes we have a movement goal that's part of the goals that we set as we continue to do. And this one particular client I just met with this week, for him, cold shower, cold water therapy, this is a goal for us right now. And I chose it for a couple of reasons, but one, from a biology perspective, right now, in terms of natural therapies that we are aware of, there is nothing that can create a better arc of epiphedrine and serotonin than cold water therapy, than getting into cold water and the way in the body responds chemically to it and what it can do. And so for this person, we're starting small. It's, we're going to take a regular warm shower like you normally do, and we're going to end it with 5 minutes of coldness. Wow. And it's this struggle. It's the hiking up before dawn and the gruelingness and I don't want to do that, but pushing yourself through and doing it, and the reward that comes in the epiphanal, the openness that comes from doing that. And whether it's a shaman that's prescribed it to hike up to a vantage point, or it's a nutrition coach that's telling you to freeze your ass off in a shower for a few minutes, it's kind of similar. It's kind of a similar, you've been tasked with this thing that you would not wake up and do on your own, but through doing it, it brings you to a place of better perspective.
Yes.
And it makes, I think it is all the rage right now, this idea of neuroplasticity. But I think doing things like that, even if it is just a cold shower, or it's getting up and doing yoga at 5 a.m. or whatever it is, pushing yourself to be consistent with doing these things, to challenge yourself, showing up for yourself, and being the person you need to be, that maybe isn't the person that's stuck on their phone all the time, or stuck in the roundabout of all the crazy stimuli out there, but being the person that you need to be for yourself, and pushing yourself through this difficulty. It makes it easier to set up habits. I think it's the reason why I'm choosing it for this client in particular, this cold water thing, because we are setting goals and we're hitting some of them, but in my opinion, we're not A+ every time. And I don't want to take money from people unless I can give them response. And so get them good response from the product and what I'm offering. And so that's why I'm at this point now with this individual, that it's cold water. That's what we're going to start working with. You're going to do something you don't like doing. You're going to do it consistently. You're going to feel the chemical benefit that comes from it. And it's going to help to set the stage for creating better habits in the future. I know it works. It's worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it with other people before, and I know it's going to work with this person. And I think that it's a mini pilgrimage, right?
It really is.
It's a 20-minute pilgrimage right there.
Yeah.
It's very condensed, but kind of the mechanics of what make pilgrimage profound are in that cold water shower, are in the process of choosing to do it, to get through it, and then to feel, oh wow, okay. And so the next time I remember how I felt, and so I can bring that into the equation as I'm making the decision to make it colder, because that's what the shaman or the nutrition coach has prescribed. It's got to start getting colder and colder, and so pretty soon we're getting into some crazy cold place, something you never wanted to do, but because we started small, we just expanded and continued on this pilgrimage, and it's going to bring this person to a better way of life.
What you say there is so important, because I keep coming back to the intimidating factor of, I can't go on a shamanic journey to Peru. How am I going to do this? Right. But we start small.
Yeah. I
we
can't
start
do a back
simple.
bend.
Yeah.
How can I do a back bend?
How can I do a back bend?
Yeah,
exactly. I can't balance on one foot.
Yep.
It is literally take baby steps.
Yep.
I like to tell folks, whether it's in yoga or yoga therapy that I do, it's create a success for yourself. Create a success for yourself.
Yes.
So I'll say something like, how many times a week do you think you can go to yoga? Oh, I like this. I can do this 5 times a week. Like, really?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say just go once.
Yeah. Yes.
Just go once.
Yep.
Have a success.
Yes.
If your goal is 1 and you do the 1, you did it.
Success.
And if you do 3 or 4, okay, you've exceeded the goal.
Right.
Well, last November I got the Apple Watch.
And, certainly did.
And I've never worn a watch before. But the reason I got it was for this damn Apple Fitness. And I did not think it would be an influence, but it's interesting when I track my progress. There's something about seeing the progress happen. So if I do a yoga class or do a workout or whatever, it gets kind of programmed in there. Yeah. And I think, okay, well, I'm good. Which is interesting. Another challenge I've always had is tracking like food. But it's like, this is happening, And if I track my food, then I can compare that with, like, the success is breeding more success.
Exactly.
And
that's exactly what happens. And that, like you were saying, Nick, that's your pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes your pilgrimage. Each little step, they add up and they all count. And you end up, at the end of the road, like, hey, I did it.
Yeah.
I can now do that back bend.
Now maybe I can go to Mongolia.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now you're like, wow, I did something I didn't want to do. I showed up, I repeatedly did it.
Mm-hmm.
I have more faith in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot get that from staring at an iPad all day long. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Right? I get identified as the shaman, but both of you are doing shamanistic things. You may call it nutritional coaching, but you're instigating someone's capacity to shift their reality, right? When you're challenging people to work with their bodies in particular. Yeah, okay, you're a certified yoga instructor, bravo, right? But you're also a healer because folks are having their reality shifted.
I like that reality shift. That's it. Yeah.
And I think what that allows us to do, because I'm thinking again about some of our listeners out there. Say, okay, if I go on this shamanic journey and I just have this major transformation in my life, and I'll want to live in a yurt for the rest of my life and
Play with reindeer.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
But I think what it sets you up to do, like you may not necessarily put down the phone or throw away the phone,
right?
But you're going to have a new perspective when you do look at your social media.
Coming back to this way of life after being in that way of life, you're gonna really learn the things that way of life taught you when you come back to
you're
this.
You're just going to look at it differently. You'll have a new set of lenses. Like, this isn't really filling me up like that experience in Peru.
Right.
And maybe I don't have to do this as much.
Yep.
Right? Not that you have to throw it away. Or even, well, what about, the rest of my life? I do have to pay bills. I got to pay the mortgage and all of that. I find that when you set aside just a few minutes, that cold shower, a few minutes of mindful breathing and meditation, it clears space in your mind and your body. So then it provides the space and opportunity and even knowledge and information and problem solving so that you can tackle that task
entirely
with a little bit more ease. Like, oh, now I know what I need to do and can just do it.
I completely agree.
And not feel confounded by it and worry about it. Like, oh, I can just kind of flow through this. I can do this now.
It does. I think I've always, gym time for me has always been therapy. It's always been a dose of recentering. It's always been something that afterwards I have better clarity. Things hit me differently. They're not especially the shit I'm worrying about, right? It just, you get to simmer down a bit, it seems. I don't know. You just have a better grasp of it. You're less all over the place. It's just, it's the physical, taking time and being physical, whether it's in nature to appreciate or it's a cold shower, the element, that's the thing that we've gotten away from so much. And that's the thing that taking time to get back to makes modern life a lot more bearable. Looking at
Just the different avenues that we reside in as far as our specialties and whatnot, just something as a way to kind of close this out a little bit. Just from your kind of neck of the woods, what would be something that you would offer our listeners that could be simple, a success-oriented task or idea that they could do that might be considered the first step on their own pilgrimage?
Yeah. I mean, well, for me, I'm always looking at the way in which one thinks of feeding themselves. Food, we're about to have a meeting with an individual that we need to start understanding food as medicine. It is natural food is very much that. Processed and refined otherwise foods in excess become disease in the body. And so I think something, a task, a very simple thing that can be a place of success and feeling good about taking care of yourself. It's a goal of eating a piece of fruit a day. That's it. One piece of fruit. There's many people that don't eat any, and prioritizing protein and plant fibers at every meal is the very reduced, like, kind of prescription that I have for everyone. And because that is what brings back better gut biome, gut and everything that comes from it is how we enjoy our existence, essentially. And so, getting to a place of being better with plant fibers coming into the body is certainly a goal. And so with that, very simply, I say start with an apple a day, or pick a fruit that you like, and let's just consistently get that into your diet, and let's see how that serves you.
Love that. Yeah, love that. What about you, Jerry? Something that you could offer our listeners from your neck of the woods as something that could be simply done to start their personal pilgrimage. Particularly since we're talking about mindfully gay. Maybe yours can be a bent towards their queerness. Is there something that you could offer someone, our listeners, that would help them with their being okay with their queerness?
No.
Okay, it's on the tip of my tongue because you did it for me. It's on the tip of my tongue. Do you want me to say it? Can I say it? You have to contemplate your gifts. That's exactly it. Like your gay gifts. Like, I remember you bringing it up, and I thought, what? It's not an honor to be gay. It's so wrong and bad and whatever. I've never thought about my gifts as being a gay person in this world. And I think, I don't know, if I may answer the question, I think that's what I would maybe task the individual with, to try to start thinking about, my God, what could they possibly be?
Well, and so what I would add to that is not just contemplating it. I think it's important, like, to journal it, to document.
Oh,
I think I have a friend who's got this journaling business you can get on Etsy or Amazon. But maybe we can put that link up.
Oh my God, that's right. I remember now. Yeah. We've got to announce.
But to do that contemplation piece, but when I'm talking about journaling is maybe just giving your time. For me, it's the mornings. I have energy in the mornings. I like the quiet of the morning. And so I often have this little chair, this little desk, and that's where I do my journaling. That's where I kind of program my day. But part of that is a contemplative journaling exercise. And it is interesting when I pose that challenge to people to contemplate the gift and the blessing and the beauty of your queerness, right? People meet it with that reaction, because we're so programmed to see it in a particular way. And so I think the pilgrim on a bigger piece is to dare to think outside of how you've been domesticated to see yourself.
Yes.
In this case, what are my gifts and blessings? What's the medicine I bring into the world?
Yes.
And my argument on that would be the lens in how we see the world is influence how I train, how I interact with others, how I do my walk is influenced by how I conceptualize myself. And so this journaling exercise, it doesn't have to be a 45-minute process. I literally do little bullet points, and every once in a while a bullet point will trigger a process, and I like to do video recordings.
There you go.
You just talk to my machine.
I have to say, I remember this, a pandemic in 2020. My mother passed in April of 2020, and it was a hard time, and I was stuck in the house that she died in, and we were all stuck in homes, and it was a really, I tried online counseling. I had like 3 of them. It just, I don't know, it didn't work. And what I turned to, and I haven't done it again, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I think I do want to get back to doing something like this. But I just started writing letters to myself.
Oh, wow.
I just started typing. I just started typing to myself. I don't know. I remember I ended every letter with "I love you and I know you love me." I don't know. It was I can't explain it exactly, but taking the time and avoiding all of the stimuli. Of course, at the time there was so much, and there is still a lot, but just slowing that down and I don't know, addressing yourself. I don't know. It was really helpful. I'm glad you just brought that up now because I think it's something I want to get back to. And I'm glad that you maybe have a product that might help with that. It sounds like.
I think, just from the kind of the yoga world, I would just simply say, even if you've never been to a yoga class, just take a moment, take a seat on the floor, on your bed, in a chair, and just take some deep breaths. Just focus on your breathing and just what it feels like, what it sounds like to breathe, because we take that for granted, right?
For sure.
And what I say in my yoga and meditation classes, like, breathing is the foundation of all of this. And it really grounds us, and it kind of sets the stage for whatever else we're going to do next in this meditative practice or in this, moving practice. We start with breath. And so I'm asking you, just take a moment. It doesn't take long, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute, and just take some deep breaths. It really can help you just kind of settle, clear your mind. And it is that starting point. It's a step. It may feel insignificant. It may feel so small, but it is a step on your own personal pilgrimage.
And if I may, it's the ongoing step throughout it is a foundation in that pilgrimage process. It's, I'm just thinking about nutrition coaching and the pillars of existence that I have, the things that I want to make sure someone's doing before I start telling them how to eat. And I'm thinking now, of course I should add breath work to it because breathing, taking the time to just stop and breathe in this crazy world that we're in, so many people are not. I have done blood panels with individuals where their carbon, what is it again that we expel? Carbon dioxide we expel.
Yeah.
Their carbon dioxide levels are higher in their body, unnaturally so, because they're not breathing. They're puppy breathing. They're hyper. They're just not breathing correctly. And just that alone, think about how everything in the world is going to hit you if your whole system, that's a stressor to the system, a physical stressor. So psychological stressors on top of a physical stressor. So absolutely, the breath is entirely foundational, and taking time to recognize that maybe you aren't breathing adequately and taking a break to just do it, without a doubt, is just such a settling, right? And then the work can begin.
And then the work can begin.
Do you know, I've been in the morning, because I'm working on mobility, I've been doing these yoga classes off of Apple Fitness, and my friend Dirk likes to start every session with, put a hand on your heart and put a hand on your abdomen.
First of all, Dirk Diggler is not teaching you yoga. His name is Dice.
Dice.
Oh my God.
Dice. We haven't been boyfriends for long.
But yes, you're right.
But anyways, and I know some of the other trainers do this too. And
set intention.
But here's what happens. Here's my reaction. I'm being honest, right? It's like, okay, I have a set amount of time in the morning.
I knew you were going to say that.
This is a 40-minute workout, and we're going to spend 3 minutes touching ourselves and breathing, right? And
that's what you need right then, sir.
But in the more, I thought, wow, isn't it interesting that I'm resisting taking a breath and allowing myself to feel it. And so I was like, okay, for Dice, I'll do it for Dice.
No, I remember my strength coach, Lee, programs for me meditation. It's mandatory, 10 minutes every day. And I remember he gave me several rounds of programming. At a certain point, he wants me to switch the time at which I do it. And I remember saying to him, Lee, I get up in the morning though, and I'm just, it's go, I got to do this and do this. He's like, you're answering it right now. Like, that's precisely, you need to dive right into the thick of that, and you need to stop and you need to meditate for 10 minutes in that when we're ready to go. Okay, I want the yoga. I need to go. I got to go to work. No, you need 10 minutes to stop and be a human in this physical world in your body, and then you can do everything else.
Then you can do the work.
But I think it's an interesting commentary. I don't think our reactions to that are unusual,
No.
right? And
That's
going back to this
normal.
idea of the pilgrimage, right? Is we're involved in a culture that encourages a layer of disassociation to mass produce for capitalism, if you will.
Yeah.
And what happens when we retaliate to that and go back to the body, go back to the feeling, go back to the experience of being human?
And not just individually, but when we can do it as a community.
Yeah.
It just amplifies it even more.
Entirely.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a recharge.
Yes. Well, I think this has been a fantastic discussion,
as
you guys,
always.
and I hope this has resonated with you out there, our grateful listeners who are listening from all over the world, it seems like, according to our stats. So thank you for listening and watching. As we wrap up this episode, we just, of course, want to remind you that if you happen to be in Salt Lake City in Utah, join us on our free social events like our hiking, meditation, fitness, all those activities that we offer here. We also have a retreat coming up in September. So go to our website, mindfullygay.com, so you can get some more information about that for that weekend retreat. And some things that are probably popping up in the show notes. If you happen to go to the show notes of this episode, we're going to list that book that Jerry mentioned, The Myth of Normal. We'll put that in there. And these guys were talking about these journaling. So a thing that I do on this side, thing I do on the side is that I've published some journals, just blank journals, but also some prompt journals, both physical and digital. And so if you're needing something to help you do some journaling, I've got it on Etsy, I've got it on Amazon, and on my personal website. So I'll put a link where you can find those journals. If you want a digital one that works great on your iPad, or a physical one that you want to put, pen to paper.
We could create links on the Mindfully Gay site.
We'll put on the website as well. So,
For sure.
So just give you some resources to start your pilgrimage. Start your pilgrimage today. And so on that note, thank you so much for listening and participating in this conversation. We encourage you to have that same conversation with yourself, with your friends, with your colleagues, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Mindfully Podcast. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes where we continue to explore fascinating topics and share meaningful stories. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next episode.